Here's the truth with these types of situations where somebody is in middle management or middle upper management, and then there is somebody else who's an executive, and there is a little bit of just mistrust, perhaps some disdain, rightly or wrongly, it doesn't matter, with how that person does their work and how competent or incompetent they are, etc., etc. So this is a very common scenario. I've been asked about this type of topic, and people tackle it in many different ways. The first observation that I'll make, and so now warning, this is going to hurt, is that there is no point asking these types of questions. The reason there's no point asking these types of questions is people who ask these questions are expecting some solution. But the problem is there is no solution to this. If you are in middle management, or if you're an IC, even if you're a senior IC, and you are in such an org where there is a powerful executive who, whatever incompetence that they demonstrate, you cannot solve it. So really, the right question that should be asked, but is seldom asked, is how should I change myself to be able to better deal with this situation? Because that is the only thing you can actually do, all right? The challenge is most of us see ourselves as perfectly competent, and we see the world as incredibly flawed, hilariously flawed. And that is that pile of garbage. As long as you see that as a feature, as long as you see that as a beautiful statue in this amazing inside world you've created, you're not going to be able to make progress. The only thing you can do in these situations is somewhat mitigate the impact of that executive's incompetence or optics obsession, and then change yourself in roughly two ways. You change your view of how you do your work and what is important in your work, or you physically change where you are working, which is like adapt or get out. So let's tackle each of those parts. How do you mitigate the negative impact of this optics obsessed person as a senior leader, middle manager, upper middle manager at the company? By the way, I've worked for such people. So the approach I've found that works is that you create two different worlds. There is the inside world, and then there's the outside world. The inside world is like everything within your sphere of influence. This is typically the team you manage, or the org you manage, or the scope you manage. Within this scope, when you are operating as the leader, as the main boss, within that scope, within this inside world, what you want to do is you don't want to poison this inside world with whatever nonsense, whatever that classic shit umbrella, right? Yes, the shit is raining, but that doesn't mean that you let this region around you have shit all over it. You can act as that shit umbrella. What's more specific is what happens in a real organization is there are all sorts of processes and blah, blah, and various things that you are subject to, or that everybody in your org is supposed to do. So I just break those rules. I just tell my team, so there is this template that everybody needs to follow to write their goals. No, this template makes zero sense. I don't want you to do it. And the managers on my team go, but that's everybody's, no, it doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do it. It's a waste of time. So when we are subject to some shit planning process, that doesn't mean that I'm going to make my team's planning process shit. But here, I'm taking personal risk. I'm taking greater accountability. And not everybody wants to do that. I'm taking the hard path. Everybody wants to take the easy path, which is, this is such a fucked up process, such a horrible planning template that we've now all been subject to. Oh, I wish this executive were smarter and blah, blah, blah. No, you can't control any of that. But you can control. Now, most people are not willing to do that. No. What if I get yelled at? Yeah. That's your fucking job. Think like an owner. So are you going to do it? Now, for some of you, as I'm saying this, you will have all these excuses in your head for why you cannot do that, right? To which I say, then I'm sorry. You are just going to be the person who just gets pushed around by these incompetent executives throughout your career. And throughout your career, you'll have reasons. And throughout your career, you will not experience the satisfaction, the sense of flow, the sense of mastery that comes from taking ownership, that comes from having confidence in your clarity of thought, that comes from defending and controlling what you can actually control. And yeah, sometimes you'll get a partially meets expectations or does not meet expectations rating. Maybe you even get fired sometimes. I'm not encouraging you to get fired. That's your choice. You decide what to do. By the way, that happens very rarely. Most of us think we'll get fired because we didn't follow a company template. I've never seen it happen. right? If you're getting fired, that's because of 10 other reasons that are the real reasons, that like you're not quite competent at your job, or you're an asshole with everybody, or whatever the reason might be. But sometimes those reasons cannot be cited. So then people cite the easy reasons like, oh, you didn't follow the company template. That's never the reason that somebody gets fired. If you're competent and you didn't follow the company template, I don't know of a single good company that would fire you for that reason. So anyway, that is what I want you to do with your inside world. Then there is the outside world. You'll still need to play the game with the outside world. This is where I asked you will need to adapt. So don't adapt in your inside world, but adapt for your outside world. And that's where you become the interface. You give the company and this executive or whoever the basics of what they need. You're still fulfilling that contract. This means more work for you. And again, I use planning and goals as one example, but this applies to pretty much anything that is imposed at the company level. Very few people can do this. But then this is why very few people attain mastery. This is why very few people are truly, truly high agency. Everybody likes to say I'm high agency. But there's always a but. But my company is not, oh, but my executive. But no, high agency by definition means you fucking don't care about the environment. If you tell me I'm high agency, or I have the potential to be high agency, but my boss doesn't let me, you are basically telling me you're not a high agency person. Nobody wants to hear that, right? Okay, just to recap, when faced with this situation, think about the inside world. You control that. And then be a good enough interface to the outside world, which has all the bullshit floating around. And this applies to everything, prioritization, blah, blah, anything. Last thing I'll share in this situation is if you happen to be in a role of some influence, which means that you are highly, highly competent and you are very well regarded within the company, including by your CEO or whatever the higher level leadership is within your company, then you can embark on a long game to get this executive fired. But that game requires a high degree of art. And as I say this, some of you who might be in this situation will say, well, I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah, if you're not comfortable with that, you're not ready for it. But yeah, you can get the executive fired. But the way to get the executive fired is not to go to the CEO and say, you need to fire this person, especially if the CEO has hired them in the last 3 months, 6 months, because you are effectively telling the CEO that his or her choice was wrong and that their judgment was wrong, etc., etc. So that is usually not the right way to do it. Besides this, there is no other solution to this problem.